I visited my favorite, Meisho Edo hyakkei, 100 Famous Views of Edo, painted by Hiroshige Ando to see what those scenes look like today. The Sakasai no Watashi, Sakasai Ferry in number 067 is a slightly elevated view of Sakasai Ferry, which was located where the current Komatsugawa line of the Metropolitan Expressway crosses the Nakagawa River. The Edo Shogunate did not build bridges over the river as much as possible at that time for defense purposes. This is one of many such bridges. Please check the location of this bridge on Apple Map. It was located about 7 kilometers west of Edo Castle. Nowadays, the Nakagawa River runs in a large north-south direction immediately to the east, but at that time, this Nakagawa River did not exist, and the Nakagawa River flowed in a large meandering path as the largest river in this area. As you can see if you zoom in on the map, south of the Komatsugawa line of the Metropolitan Expressway is Shinohashidori, and the Ukiyo-e subway Shinjuku line runs almost parallel to it, and the station is located almost above ground from Higashi-Oshima Station, almost on the Nakagawa River. The red gradient represents Hiroshige's viewpoint. Beyond his line of sight is the Metropolitan Oshima Komatsugawa Park, and to the north and south of it is a forest of metropolitan housing and other buildings. If you switch Apple Map to Street View, you can get a better idea of the size of the area. To understand how they were able to create such a large park, please see the map from 1970. It is because both banks of the Nakagawa River at that time formed a large factory area, and later the Tokyo Metropolitan Government purchased this area and redeveloped it on a large scale. Next, please take a look at the pictorial map of the time when Hiroshige painted this picture. The circled point is Nihonbashi. Travelers leaving Nihonbashi head north toward Odenmacho and enter the Ukiyo-e. From before the Kanda River, turn right and cross the Ryogoku Bridge. To the south of the river was the Tatekawa River, and on the north side of the river was the straight Sakasai Edo. Travelers took this road to Nakagawa and crossed the river at Sakasai Ferry. After crossing to the Chiba side, they could head a little north, avoiding the marshy areas, and go through Ichikawa to Sakura, Narita, and Boso. This road was the main road from Edo to the east. It is the Chiba Edo today. Let us take a closer look at Hiroshige's painting. First, at the top of the painting, quite far beyond, is Mount Nokojiriyama. There were no tall buildings in those days, so it must have actually been visible from this location. Below it, the villages of Sakai and Komatsugawa are depicted, surrounded by pine trees and Japanese zelkova trees. These are the villages on the Chiba side of the Nakagawa River, which is crossed by the Nakagawa River at Sakasai Ferry. The lower half of the painting shows the Nakagawa River in large scale. Since logistics was active in this area, a straw-covered transport boat is also floating in the river. There is a reed bed in the river, and 5 egrets are depicted there. This area used to be brackish water, with the tide rising from the ocean at high tide. This meant that many fish could be caught, and many little egrets and other waterfowl came to the area to take advantage of them. Because the river flows upside down, this area was called Sakasai. I actually went to this location. The blue bridge in the photo is the current Sakasai Bridge, and Sakasai Ferry was located a little downstream of I. Today, there is an information board at the side of Sakasai Bridge under the highway that states that Sakasai Ferry existed here. This is what the view from the west side of Sakasai Ferry looks like. It is a bit dark, with the highway passing almost directly overhead. A little further downstream, the river becomes more open, and the atmosphere is closer to that seen by Hiroshige. Both banks of the Nakagawa River are bordered by the Metropolitan Oshima Komatsugawa Park, and the east and west sides of the park are connected by 2 pedestrian bridges. With such a large piece of land, one would think that a large leisure facility with a huge capital would be built here, but in fact, this area has had major problems. Here is a map from the GSIA with the passage of time. First, please see the current situation on the orange map. The location of Sakasai Ferry is circled in red. This map is from the early Meiji period, a few years after Hiroshige painted this area. You can see that the Chiba-Kaido Road extends along the Nakagawa River, and urbanization and residential development have begun to progress. In the late Meiji period, we can see that the momentum of this trend increased and the area around the Nakagawa River was rapidly converted into a factory. Around 1930, the maintenance of the large Arakawa River was coming to an end, and the number of factories along the Nakagawa River, where water was freely available, was increasing rapidly. This is an aerial view of the current situation. If you switch to an enlarged Apple map of the area around Sakasai Ferry, you can see that a fairly large area of land was converted into Oshima Komatsugawa Park and an apartment complex. In 1973, a large amount of hexavalent chromium tailings were discovered in the lower center of the photo at the site of the Oshima Railcar Inspection Station of the Toei Shinjuku Line during a subway construction survey, and this became known throughout Japan as a soil contamination problem. As you can see on the map, this area is an industrial area, and by the 1970s was the site where Nippon Chemical Industry had buried a large amount of chrome tailings. Since the tailings contained hexavalent chromium, it was treated to make it non-toxic and returned to the site, where it was turned into a park and opened in 1997. Originally, in the 1970s, there was the fact that Nippon Chemical Industries in Edogawa and Koto wards had many health problems such as lung cancer and holes in the nose among its employees, and hexavalent chromium was then widely reported in the news as a pollutant in Japan. Hexavalent chromium, which is used for chrome plating and other applications, must be detoxified by converting it to trivalent chromium, mainly by means of a reducing agent, when disposed of. The disposal of tailings by Koto Ward is said to have been completed in 2000, but a paper published in 2014 reported that seepage has occurred during heavy rain and snowfall. Furthermore, even now, local council members have reported yellow water seeping from one part of the park to the water's edge on rainy days. I inserted the current photo into Hiroshige's painting. I wonder if Hiroshige would have never dreamed of such a situation. Since the situation is not conducive to canoeing, let alone playing with waterfall, I have switched to a picture that is a little more Hiroshige-like. It is said that Japan has become affluent beyond the period of rapid economic growth, but even the negative legacy that remains cannot be detoxified, and even parks and metropolitan housing have been built on piles of land. We should think carefully about whether this is a sign of prosperity or not, and compare it with the landscape left by Hiroshige.